probably heard chemistry called the central science, right? And for good reason. It connects pretty much everything. But a field that big, where do you even start? Well, today, we're going to break it all down into its 8 major branches, and we're going to do it by following the story of one single molecule. Let's get into it. So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with a basic definition. Then we'll meet the molecule that's going to be our guide. After that, we'll journey through the core and the applied branches to see how it all connects back to, well, your world.
All right, so first things first. When we say the word chemistry, what are we actually talking about?
At its heart, chemistry is really just the study of stuff and how that stuff changes. Simple as that. From the air you're breathing to the device in your hands, it's all chemistry in action.
Now, trying to understand all the materials in the entire universe at once, well, that's just impossible, right? So instead, we're going to zoom in and tell 8 totally different stories about one single substance. So how do we make sense of something so huge? Well, we do it by looking at one thing through 8 very different lenses. And meet our guide for this journey, acetic acid. You probably know it as the main ingredient that gives vinegar its kick. We're about to see how each branch of chemistry looks at this one little molecule in a completely different way.
Let's start with the 4 core branches. Think of these as the foundational pillars, They support everything else in the entire field of chemistry.
First up, we've got physical chemistry. This is kind of like the physics of chemistry. It's all about the fundamental laws and theories, the rule book, really, that governs how all matter behaves.
So a physical chemist looks at our acetic acid molecule and asks the big why questions. Why does it boil? What are the energy requirements to make it freeze? What fundamental laws explain its atomic shape? They are digging deep into the absolute basics of its properties.
Then we have organic chemistry. This is basically the entire world of one element, carbon. And since carbon is the backbone of life, this branch covers a massive range of things, from plastics to proteins.
An organic chemist finds acetic acid fascinating, specifically because it contains carbon. They want to know how to build it, what kind of reactions it can do, and how it relates to other carbon compounds like, say, the keratin proteins that make up your hair. And this slide shows the big divide perfectly. If organic chemistry is the world of carbon, then inorganic chemistry covers, well, pretty much everything else on the periodic table, even though their paths do cross sometimes.
So yeah, inorganic chemistry studies all the other elements and what they can do. We're talking metals, minerals, and common substances like the ammonia and household cleaners.
Now, an inorganic chemist looks at our acetic acid molecule and kind of breaks it down. Instead of seeing the whole carbon-based structure, they're focused on the properties of the individual atoms themselves, the carbon, the hydrogen, and the oxygen.
Our 4th core branch, biochemistry, is where chemistry and biology collide. It explores all the complex chemical reactions that, actually make life possible.
This is where it gets biological. A biochemist puts our molecule inside a living system and asks, what role does acetic acid play in the human body? How do plants use molecules to grow from a tiny seed into a huge stalk? It's literally the chemistry of life itself.
Okay, with those foundations in place, let's turn to the applied branches. This is where chemistry gets put to work to solve actual, real-world problems.
Kicking off the applied branches is industrial chemistry. And this is all about taking a reaction from a tiny lab beaker and figuring out how to scale it up for massive factory-sized production.
The industrial chemist's question is super practical. How do we make massive amounts of acetic acid safely, cheaply, and efficiently so it can be used in food, plastics, and tons of other products?
All right, from a giant factory, we're going to zoom all the way in, like into the very heart of the atom itself. This is nuclear chemistry. It's not about how atoms bond, but about what's happening inside the nucleus. Think radioactivity, fusion, and fission.
A nuclear chemist might take our little acetic acid molecule and just blast it with radiation to see what happens to the nuclei of its atoms. It's a completely different level of focus for sure. Now we zoom back out. Environmental chemistry looks at the impact of chemicals on our world, everything from the atmosphere down to our drinking water, and of course, the effects on our health. So this branch asks about the downstream impact of our molecule. Is acetic acid, or anything we make from it, harmful to ecosystems? How does it travel through the environment? And what does it do to our planet? And our final branch is analytical chemistry. It's all about answering 2 simple but incredibly important questions. What is this? And how much of it is there? The analytical chemist is the one who provides the hard data for all the other branches. For our molecule, they'd be the ones to confirm its exact boiling point or figure out the purity of a sample. They are basically the detectives of the chemical world. So we have taken one single molecule on a journey through 8 very different fields. What's the big takeaway from all this?
You know, the most important thing to remember is that these branches aren't just isolated boxes. They are all interconnected ways of asking questions. A biochemist relies on an analytical chemist's tools, and an industrial chemist uses the principles a physical chemist discovered. It all works together to help us understand our world. And that brings it all right back to you. From the biochemistry of the breakfast you ate this morning, to the industrial chemistry in your phone, to the environmental chemistry of the air you breathe, this science is everywhere. So which branch do you see playing the biggest role in your life?
You ever just look around? I mean, really look at the chair you're on or the water you're drinking, the air you're breathing, and just wonder, what is all this stuff, really? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're stripping it all back to the absolute basics. We're going to learn the fundamental language of chemistry by thinking of the universe as just a giant set of building blocks. I mean, it's a huge question, right? One of the oldest ones we've ever asked. It sounds almost philosophical. But the cool thing is, chemistry gives us a really practical, straightforward way to start tackling it. And it all begins with just sorting. We just need to figure out how to sort all the stuff in the universe into a few simple categories. So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with the big stuff we can actually see and touch. Then we'll zoom way, way in to find those basic building blocks. We'll figure out their unique fingerprints, learn how to write out the recipes to build with them, and finally, we'll tackle a crazy idea, how to weigh something you can't even see. Okay, let's get into it. First up, what is everything made of? To even start answering that, we need a word for all this stuff around us. And in chemistry, that word is matter. It's a really simple, but honestly, super powerful idea. Anything that has mass and takes up space, that's matter. So your phone? That's matter. The air in the room? Yep, matter. You? You're matter. It's the absolute starting point for, well, everything. But here's the catch you might not think about. Most of the matter we actually see day to day, it isn't just one single thing. It's almost always a mixture. Think about it. The ocean, the dirt outside, even that cup of coffee, they're all just a bunch of different pure substances physically jumbled together. And these mixtures basically come in two flavors. First, you've got homogeneous mixtures. These are the ones that are so well blended you can't see the different parts. Like when you dissolve salt in water, where did the salt go? It's still there, just perfectly mixed. Then you have heterogeneous mixtures. This is like mixing sand and salt together. You can totally see the different bits. It really just all comes down to how uniform it looks. Okay, so if pretty much everything is a mixture, what happens when we start separating those mixtures? What do we get when we break them down into their pure individual parts? Well, that's when things get really interesting. That's where we find the real building blocks of the universe. And here it is. We've arrived. This is the ultimate fundamental Lego brick of reality. It's called an element. An element is a pure substance that you just can't break down into anything simpler. Not with chemistry anyway. Think oxygen, iron, gold. These are the elements. They're like the 118 special types of Legos that the entire universe is built from. So what happens when you start snapping those different Lego bricks together? You get a compound. It's that simple. Take water, for instance. It's a compound. It's built from hydrogen and oxygen, two different elements. But when you chemically bond them together, you don't just have a mix of hydrogen and oxygen anymore. You've created a totally new substance with its own unique properties. So, to really nail this down, the key difference here is all about chemical bonds. An element, like pure oxygen, is as simple as it gets. You can't break it down further. But a compound, like water, is made of elements that are chemically locked together. And because they're locked together, you can perform a chemical reaction to unlock them and get your original elements back. And it's super important not to get mixtures and compounds confused. They're totally different things. In a mixture, all the pieces are just physically hanging out in the same space, but they're still their own thing. In a compound, the elements have chemically bonded to become something brand new. I love this analogy. A mixture is like a crowd of individuals, but a compound, that's a team working together as one unit. Okay, great. So we've got our fundamental building blocks, the elements. But wait, there are over 100 of them. How do we tell them apart? How do we know gold from lead? Well, it turns out every single element has its own unique, unchangeable ID code. It's like a fingerprint. And that fingerprint, it's just a single number. That's it. It's called the atomic number. All it is a count of how many protons are in the center or nucleus of an atom. And that one number is the only thing that defines what an element is. That's right, if an atom has 8 protons, it's oxygen, always, no exceptions. If it has 79 protons, it is gold, period. If you could somehow change that number, you would literally change the element into a different one. It is the absolute non-negotiable ID card for every atom in the universe. Now, there's another number you'll hear about called the mass number. This one's pretty simple too. It's just the protons plus the other main particle in the nucleus, the neutrons. It tells you about the atom's weight, which is useful, but, and this is the key part, it does not change the element's identity. That's still all about the protons, all about that atomic number. All right, so we can now officially identify any element just by its atomic number. Awesome. But what about when they combine to make compounds? How do we write that down? We need a kind of shorthand, right? A set of instructions, like a recipe or a blueprint. And that's exactly what a chemical formula is. It's chemistry's universal shorthand. I mean, nobody wants to write out a molecule made of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom every time. So instead, we just write H2O. The letters are the symbols for the elements, and that little number at the bottom, the subscript, tells you how many of that atom are in the recipe. So simple, so powerful. Now, to add one little layer here, these chemical recipes actually come in 2 main types. You've got the molecular formula, which tells you the exact actual number of atoms in one molecule. So for glucose, that's C6H12O6. But then there's the empirical formula. This just gives you the simplest possible ratio. So for glucose, you can divide all those numbers by 6, and the simplest ratio is just CH2O. And, sometimes, like with good old H2O, the simplest ratio and the actual formula are exactly the same. Okay, we're on to our final piece of the puzzle. We can identify atoms, we can write recipes for how they combine, but there's a giant practical problem we've been ignoring. How on earth do you weigh one of these things? How do you measure the mass of something so small you could never, ever see it? I mean, this was a massive headache for chemists for a long, long time. It's not like you can just pop a single atom on a scale and get a reading, right? So they had to get really, really clever. They had to invent a completely new way of thinking about mass itself. And the solution they came up with is just brilliant. They realized, hey, what if we stop trying to get an absolute weight in grams? Instead, they decided to measure everything relative to one single standard. So everyone agreed to take one specific kind of carbon atom. We call it carbon-12. And they just said, okay, this atom has a mass of exactly 12. Then every other atom's mass is just measured by comparing it to that one standard. It's such a genius workaround. So here's how you actually use it. Let's say we want the mass of a water molecule, H2O. You just look up the relative atomic masses on a chart. Hydrogen is about 1 AMU and oxygen is about 16 AMU. We have 2 hydrogens, so that's 2 times 1, plus 1 oxygen, which is 16. Add them up, and the molecular mass of water is about 18 atomic mass units. It's just simple addition. And just like that, we can calculate the mass of things we could never, ever hope to weigh on a scale. Oh, and by the way, you might hear this called formula mass too, especially for things that aren't molecules, but the calculation is exactly the same. And there you have it. We've actually done it. We started with what is stuff, and we've drilled all the way down to the rules for identifying, describing, and even weighing single atoms. We've basically learned the alphabet and grammar for the language of chemistry. But of course, learning the language just opens the door to the next even bigger question. How does this simple set of blocks, this handful of rules, create the staggering infinite complexity we see all around us? How does it build everything from a living cell to a burning star? And exploring that, well, that's the endless wonder of chemistry.